Welcome to the webinar called 3 Steps to Navigate Financial Wellbeing for Menopausal Women in Your Organisation. I'm Melanie White, the co-CEO of Sage Women's Health, and I'm really excited to present one of our consultants, Michelle Hasani. Michelle has a really interesting background, and I won't go through all of it today, but she has a grad diploma in applied science in innovation and service management. She's got coaching qualifications, Cert 4 in fitness, and has over 2 decades of experience in a variety of roles, including leadership and mental fitness. Michelle's been with Sage since the start, and we're very excited to have her here presenting today. So, Michelle, I'm going to hand over to you to get started with today's session, and I'll be on mute. I'll also be looking in the chat box. If anyone has questions, feel free to type those in there, and we can either unmute you or we can just ask Michelle to field the questions. So I'll hand over now to Michelle. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Mel. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm just going to slide through because we've done this. Today, what we're going to look at is just a bit of some information about financial wellbeing, taking then a closer look on the spotlight for women, the impact for businesses, and 3 steps to start navigating financial wellbeing within your organisation. We'll have time for some Q&A and then, some opportunities to look at what might be next for you. So to get started, we'll look at what financial wellbeing is. So financial wellbeing is defined by, and this is from, I haven't put the reference there, but this is through ANZ, but this is basically financial wellbeing is having enough money to meet your needs now and in the future. In 2021, research also showed that in addition to people's ability to meet everyday commitments, it was about how comfortable they would feel about their financial situation and having the resilience to sustain financial setbacks, and whether people were feeling secure for the future was added as a 4th dimension or component to measuring financial wellbeing. So financial wellbeing is on a continuum. So the Department of Social Services, Australian government in 2017 developed a discussion paper, and this was introduced in that. So the continuum looks at people that are at risk, which have limited employment, no financial safety net, poor financial skills. It then goes to crisis. So often there are life events like job loss or illness that can impact people being able to meet their basic needs, and being able to then going into recovery. So stable financial situations, to look for work, they can't access money or in an emergency or follow a budget. And then you've got wellbeing. So that's where people are secure, they've got secure employment, making good financial decisions and saving regularly. So some individuals will cycle in and out of crisis on an ongoing basis. So, that then has a huge impact on their wellbeing. So if we look at it from an Australian perspective, so financial wellbeing, Australians are feeling worried about the economy and are financially stressed. So financial stress impacts most aspects or all aspects of wellbeing, so physical, mental, social, family life, and work satisfaction. And in September 2022, headline inflation in Australia hit a 20% high at 7.3%, and financial stress had doubled over the past 2 years. And in September 2023, the inflation rates dropped, so in that last 12 months, to 5.4, but it's still above the Reserve Bank target of 2 to 3%. So some of the current challenges, and these stats are out of the latest Roy Morgan Financial Wellbeing Indicator report. So if we take a look at this, what it's showing is that there is a decline in people feeling comfortable about the current and future situation. There's an increased difficulty due to the cost, the rising cost of housing. So particularly in terms of interest rates and the rental decrease and the shortage of affordable housing options. And women are doing it tougher. So this picture here or these diagrams show, you can see in terms of meeting costs, there's clearly been a decline along with feeling comfortable and people's resilience. And when you look at the picture between men and women, you can see that women are doing it tougher. So when we take a closer look at the Australian context, 1/3 of Australians are stating that the cost of living is causing them stress. 1/3 are unable to raise $4,000 for an unexpected emergency. And 1 in 5 buy now, pay later loans were for essentials such as food and utilities. The impact of building financial resilience. People experiencing financial challenges are 2 times as likely to have mental health challenges. And there's an estimated link between emotional stress, restricted financial resources, and physical symptoms. So people experience headaches, insomnia, and chronic illness. And that is all leading to harmful decision makings where people are choosing or having to make a decision between essential items and necessary medical care, which is a bit problematic. So who is it impacting? You can see from this graph that in Australia, 19.9% are impacted. And you can see across different areas. So renters, people from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, household incomes under 100,000 per year, young people, people not working, women, and those living in country areas. So if you combine a lot of those, it's impacting. So if we take a spotlight in on women, so financial wellbeing scores out of 100 are categorised in Australia. So 62 out of 100 women versus 66 out of 100 men are struggling. So that's 14% are struggling, 17% were getting by, and 42% doing okay, with only 27% not having any worries. When we look at it from the age, what we can see is that the age, age lower across all age ranges. So women are lower across all age ranges in terms of their confidence score, or their wellbeing score. And as people get older, as women get older, that score decreases. So the gap decreases between men and women. And the social and economic factors are influence more than 50% of a financial wellbeing score, and that's across all areas.
I think we were talking to Rebecca Mitchell about this recently, and she was talking about the fact that women's homelessness is the highest ever at this menopausal age group, and the fact that we don't know enough about those other factors that are affected. And she was discussing the fact that there is going to be more research into that. And of course, there is the Senate inquiry that will be coming out over the next year into the repercussions of menopause. I guess you're going to talk about that now a little bit.
Yeah. So the interplay between financial wellbeing and menopause. So when we look at, so I guess all of that, when we're just putting it into context, women's financial wellbeing is already lower than men at a starting point. So when we look at rental and single parent families, older women who are experiencing potential separation or those kind of things, there's a lot of hidden costs around, as you said, Mel, homelessness. And with the increased issues of affordability around affordable housing, health and unpaid care that women are often responsible for, lower incomes because women are generally working in more part-time work than full-time work, transport and education costs. They all impact on the financial well-being of women, and particularly when we then take it to menopausal women. So the interplay between financial well-being and menopause, you have probably heard these stats before, but menopause is costing Australian women 17 billion in lost earnings and retirement savings. And in Australia, nearly 27% of women retire before the age of 55 and have 40% less superannuation than men. So as you can see, it impacts across women's careers. So there's career interruption, reduced earning potential, job discrimination, increased focus on physical and mental health. There's an information gap, and there's also stigma that's related to menopause. So when we look at the impact for employers, what we can see is that there are three key areas that we'll focus on, which is that talent retention. So with 10 to 13% of women leaving work because of menopause, and women are leaving, that's about 7 years earlier. So 25 to 30% of leaders move to lesser roles. So what happens is that often women in perimenopause don't necessarily connect the symptoms that they're experiencing with the way that it's impacting work. And so often they will change what they're doing rather than asking for support. And so what that then does is lead to that talent retention for an organisation, which, in turn has a ripple effect in terms of the cost of turnover. So with 17 billion per year costing Australian women, and then 10 billion per year replacement costs to businesses for up to 7 years. And when you look at turnover costs, that includes things like not just the recruitment, but the training, the lost IP that exists, the fact that there's a lack then of the customer relation. Like if it's a customer based, often people follow people. So it's not just, there's often a ripple effect. So if a great leader leaves that's a woman, then often the team might change too. And so that then has a ripple effect that impacts. And gender equity and workplace culture. So a lack of women role models for younger employees can really impact a workplace culture. But also there's a whole heap of research that's been done around gender equity, and with the push for organisations to be more balanced within their gender across their boards, their leadership team, what often happens is that women are walking out or changing their roles at a time when they're actually at the prime, when they can move into positions because they may have become an empty nester, or they've got the confidence and ability to be stepping into those roles in terms of job knowledge and expertise. But when the impacts of the side effects of menopause then get in the way, that's often when organisations are losing that talent. So I want us to think about financial well-being is everybody's business. It's not just the individuals. I think if we start to think about financial well-being in that way, then when it comes to workplaces, we can certainly look at what responsibility does the individual have, what responsibility does the workplace have, and how does that then connect to community as well, because nothing is in isolation. So to get there, what I'm wanting to share is 3 steps to get started. So the first being around awareness, the second is about systems, and the third culture. So under awareness, it's fostering opportunities to build financial knowledge. Menopause is not a women's issue. It's actually a social and economic problem, And in terms of culture, it's about leadership, empathy, respect, and openness, and changing the conversation. And I've put across the bottom that nurturing a workplace culture that supports all people, balance and financial security is really important. It runs across all of those levels. It's not just under one. And I guess it's about education, engagement, and enabling a workforce. So awareness. If we start with the knowledge and skills to support an ageing workplace, what's important is equipping line managers and supervisors with knowledge, skills, and practical supports that they can offer. Now, often leaders don't have any idea what they are. And also, if you're a male leader, it can be quite confrontational to have those conversations, particularly if you're a younger man. So it's about upskilling people to feel more confident, to be able to have those open and honest conversations and the recognition that it is not just the individuals, but it has an impact on the workplace. So thinking of it from the social and economic perspective as well. Then it's about linking employee wellbeing strategies with initiatives to foster financial security and develop financial capability and independence. And I think it's really important to recognise that if we look at the overall state of women's financial wellbeing, employers have an opportunity to start thinking about from the induction of an employee, those steps that they can take to start building financial capability and independence, because people don't know what they don't know. So, and some of the stuff in here is quite simple. It's about linking to people understanding from an early age, what is their super, what are the insurances that they might have in play, what else might they need to put in place to protect themselves and their family at difficult times. And so part of that can be fostering really good relationships with the superannuation provider or the main super provider for companies, and then working collaboratively there. The other is around systems. So each unique workplace needs a tailored policy, strategy, and work plan. I think it's important to recognise that each industry is going to have different needs. And so it's working with your workforce to be able to tailor those specifically to what the needs are, and then focusing on low-cost micro adjustments for significant impact. So often it's not about changing everything. It's about working out simple, practical, low-cost or no-cost strategies that can really help a workplace. So an example might be in the healthcare industry, thinking about providing sanitary products, or if people need to have additional or flexibility around breaks because they may have experienced a bleed or something like that, being able to actually build those things in. It's about thinking about uniforms and how they may impact on a person's ability to regulate the temperature and show up at their best. Just to name a few, it'll be different for different industries. So in terms of culture, leaders need to be able to hold space for people and guide them to appropriate support. So to be able to hold space for people, leaders actually need the confidence, the knowledge, and the awareness so that they're able to actually do that, to guide. But they also need to understand what supports are available and how best to link people. So there's an education piece and a training piece that might sit there. And ultimately, it's about changing the conversation. So by providing opportunities for interactive, experiential engagement, and shifting the conversation so that it's open and it's transparent and people can feel confident and comfortable within a workplace. I think is really important in terms of starting that conversation. So I've done that very quickly, but I want to open it up to, I guess it would be great to think about the situations you're in and whether you've got any questions and how you might start that process. These are just 3 simple steps. And it's a starting point, but it's a journey. It's an ongoing journey of collaboration and co-design with your team.
Michelle, thanks very much for presenting that. As you said, it's about starting simply and finding some easy starting points. Could you talk a little bit about engaging superannuation companies and getting them to support workforces?
Yeah, I think there's some great examples where super companies can provide education sessions to employees, or to workers within the workforce. So that might be a lunch and learn. It might be about a lot of different super companies have awareness training. They also have financial advisors, or they can do some planning around what you might need for your retirement, and so then help to develop some simple strategies around what contribution women might need to be making additionally in terms of that projection that they'll need for retirement. And I think when you feel confident and you understand what it is that you might need for the lifestyle ahead, you can plan and you can take those steps. And so partnering with your super company to be able to do that is really important. A simple step that if the super company doesn't provide financial advice, because there's a whole heap of regulations around that, it could be that a simple strategy that a workplace might want to put in play is to provide some financial advice sessions at a low cost or no cost to employees, so that they're really set up for planning for that future. So that's a good way to do it. But I think fostering that relationship where super's coming in, delivering information and education sessions, and people understand what's in their super, what it means, how does it impact when they take breaks, that kind of stuff, then information is power. So you can plan better when you know what it is that that's there.
I'm going to keep going unless anyone else wants to jump in. I know that you did some work in this space recently in South Australia. Can you talk a little bit about that without breaching any confidentiality or anything, about what the outcomes were of that project?
Yeah. Can you give me 1 second, and I'm just going to grab some info because I didn't prepare for it. Hang on.
Yep. This was a special project that I know Michelle was involved in, so it's very relevant to this conversation, I think.
Yeah, so over the last couple of years, I did some place-based work with a number of organisations where we're using the FIAP framework, so Financial Inclusion Action Planning Framework, and we had 10 or 11 organisations that came together and started to think about what it would be to think. So the framework looks at a number of, sorry, God, my brain is really not there, but basically what it is, it's about building financial resilience for customers, for employees, for contractors, and for the broader community. And so what we saw in Northern Adelaide was that we had, the group had 10 actions across, so it's across 4 different areas, so products and services, economic security, understanding financial vulnerability, and financial capability. And so there were a number of actions, and if I just focus in on the employees, there were 21 actions to look at improving employee financial wellbeing. And some of the outcomes around that was that there was, well, actually, I'm going to talk a bit broader because the insights were amazing. So there were 35 for customers and students, 20 for community, 21 for employees, and 6 for suppliers. And what we saw is just over a 12-month period that in terms of economic participation, there were 1,671 First Nations job seekers supported through mentoring and job placement. There was an increased awareness of 13,000 people in terms of client screening and assessment. So organisations recognise that by adding the questions around financial wellbeing and hardship to their intake process, that awareness raised, so then they were able to target services better in terms of knowing what the issues were. In terms of employee wellbeing, we had 7 employee financial wellbeing sessions held across 5 organisations with 144 attending. So these were the organisations varied in size from 2 employees to national services. So it was a good uptake. We saw 4 organisations had established 62 new partnerships to improve outcomes for their students and clients. And we also saw 157 financial and career management workshops that were held, and we had 990 people attend those, which was quite amazing. Universities started to think about better access to financial support, particularly for women students and from diverse backgrounds, but women in STEM. So there were 31 scholarships valued at over 171,000, which were given out in the 12-month period. And in terms of women in business, we saw 230 women attend events, and there were 3 cultural and linguistically diverse business events which had over 205 attendees. So we also provided 2 full-day financial capability and vulnerability training sessions with over 62 attendees. So the whole purpose of that was to really build people's knowledge, awareness and capability that then impacted, and some of the feedback was very much a lot of the workers who had been working frontline with clients hadn't actually thought about their own financial wellbeing. And so the knowledge that we shared with them then helped them to improve their own financial wellbeing. So that's just in a nutshell, just some of the outcomes from that project. And it's amazing, just in 12 months, little shifts can make a really big difference.
That speaks to the point that you mentioned earlier, it's these micro adjustments. I know that was in a different context, but it still is a great example of how starting the conversation is so important. And it sounds like you got really great engagement with a variety of different initiatives and were able to reach a number of different groups. And I think the other thing that's really clear is that starting at the point of induction and doing that survey there then allows an organisation to develop a targeted approach to supporting people. And much could be said the same about menopause, I suppose, as a subset of people who struggle with financial challenges at that time of life. And we've heard that women might leave the workforce early and then regret it later. And that's some of the conversations we've had in Sage Women's Health. How can we support them to stay well and feel resilient at a difficult time so they can maintain their security? I'm just seeing Amanda's popped in the chat box.
Yeah, I'm just reading the same question.
You mentioned earlier that women sometimes don't recognise that menopause could be part of the reason why they may be leaving work and taking on lesser roles. I hope I heard that right. Could menopause education in workplaces help address that, especially for women in early 40s?
Absolutely. I think that's really vital. I've recently done some consultations with organisations, and some of the comments that came out were that one woman in particular shared that she'd left the workplace, and it wasn't until a number of years later, when she had more knowledge and information about what was going on, that she realised that it was actually the symptoms of her perimenopause, and she had left a career as a result of that. Now, that's only one individual, but that's a consistent story across. So I think if we start to open the conversation, then good information can be provided to women early, so that they then are able to recognise the signs and symptoms earlier and then seek support. What was really interesting in that particular case is that person, and I've heard it from a number of women, didn't go to the doctor. So they struggled in silence rather than actually going and having an informed conversation and finding out what might be going on, and then what they might be able to do to mitigate those symptoms so that they could adjust their work and stay, rather than change their career or move on to something else. So I think there's a great opportunity to really open up more conversations about menopause. And I think in a broader context, I think it's about aging well, and then how menopause fits within that, because we have an aging population in Australia, and so it's about recognising the transitions that happen. There's, on top of menopause, there's the increase of, as we age, increase of higher health risks related to just that aging process. So organisations being more equipped to be able to support people going through stages of aging is really important. And menopause is a big part of that for women, but it's not just that. So, that's an important thing.
Yeah, I think the context of healthy aging is really important too, because a lot of companies don't, or are wondering, should I just spend money on menopause? Or what about the rest of my workforce? And it is a time of life when a lot of health issues can come up if you perhaps haven't had the right support or had the right habits or those sorts of things. A lot of people turn to unhealthy habits to cope with stresses of that time of life. And so looking at what healthy aging options there are for workforces is really important too, and including the fact that it doesn't have to be menopause leave, it can be flexible leave, which works for a number of scenarios, like caring for aging parents.
Yeah, I also think, when you look at the stats related to the cost of workplace wellbeing and how it impacts, it's really interesting when you look at, $4 billion is an estimate cost of alcohol on Australian workplaces. And that's an estimate of 3.6 billion related to absenteeism. So often people, alcohol can be one of those cruxes that people use when they're not necessarily sure what's going on, or to manage stress, those kind of things. So that has a real impact. So education around where alcohol fits within, managing your overall well-being, particularly in menopause, because it can actually have a negative impact to your symptoms. A simple tweak in terms of education support, what else can people do, can then change that, not just for that individual or for that workplace, but in terms of the Australian economy, it has a really big impact, So that's, and I think the biggest thing to recognise is that all of these, if someone's financial wellbeing isn't great, it really does impact their mental wellbeing, the mental health and wellbeing. So it has the ripple effect across all aspects of life. So if you have someone that's unwell, because the stress from financial pressure is there, they're not going to show up and give their best every day anyway. And they then often, what women do is they'll work later, work harder, at a cost to their physical and emotional well-being to get the job done, just so that, because part of the stigma attached to menopause is that they really just don't want to be seen as dropping the ball, you know. And so I think there's a cost there as well, because that high level of pressure and stress ongoing then can link to other mental health and chronic health issues long term. So, it's important to look at really clear strategies.
You mentioned also experiential approaches, and I think we've had this conversation before with different people saying we don't just want a workshop or a seminar. It's what can we do where we actively engage people, and partly even from the perspective of getting people back into the office. But can you speak to that a little bit, Michelle? Maybe the value of experiencing something versus just being told something.
Yeah, I think, it comes down to working in collaboration and partnership with the people who are your greatest asset. So often your workforce has the answers, but if you're not actually having those open conversations, then that wisdom, that knowledge, that expertise is not there. And I think one of the things that I see, Mel, is that people are afraid that if you open that conversation and you give them the freedom of voice, that then they can't deliver. I think what's really important when it comes to co-designing is it has to be done, or that experiential component has to be done in the context of some boundaries, right? So if a workplace is setting some boundaries around, this is the strategic direction we want to go in, this is the constraints that we have to work within in terms of budget, in terms of whatever they might be, and it'll be different. And then open the conversation around within that context, how do we then support those micro adjustments that might keep you well and at work. I think what happens is that people don't understand about putting the framework around how you have those conversations so that you can then deliver on the outcomes. And I think it's about not recognizing that just people having a voice sometimes can change the whole attitude towards that culture. It doesn't mean that you have to deliver on everything, but it's about then going through a process where they're included, they're heard, and it's done with the intent of wanting to meet the needs of your workforce.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've had a lot of conversations with companies and psychologists and doctors over the past few years, and the biggest thing I notice is that there's a lack of trust between employees and employers, and a sense by employees that they don't feel valued. And I think when you give someone a voice and give them the opportunity to be heard, it really does create a sense of feeling respected and valued, and that they've had the chance to express an opinion or a point of view. And if that is part of the culture, then that creates the shifts that need to happen for people to understand each other and have empathy, but also to bring in initiatives that really help people, because it's the things that they've said that they want and they're being listened to, and then those initiatives are being delivered.
I think too, it also, it really links back to, WHO has the healthy workplace global model that's available, that's there, and it has 5 keys to creating that healthy workplace. The first being that leadership commitment, the second being worker involvement, and then you've got your business and ethics and legalities that sit, and sustainability and integration, and that continuous improvement cycle. So if you have that approach, and I always love to link it to a learning organisation, where if you're continually learning and you're working in collaboration with your workforce, basically you're then able to look at, I love, it's experimenting. Not everything's going to work. If you're trying low cost, no cost, examples, then you have the opportunity to pivot as you need, rather than being stuck in this is solid. Now, that might be easier for smaller organisations than it is for larger organisations, but there's no reason why you can't test things within a department or a unit, rather than it just being, we're going to roll this out completely. So it's about being fluid in the approaches. And, a lot of government and non-government organisations are working in those fluid environments anyway. So this is just how you marry that together to be able to, really bring in it's that whole coaching framework of, test it, try it, what's worked, what hasn't, why hasn't it worked, and then keep the good and then grow from there.
It's a sort of mindset, isn't it? I'll just put it out to everyone. I've asked all the questions I had, and see if anyone else has anything they'd like to say or ask or comment on. And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to pop in the chat box a link to book a chat with Michelle if you'd like to. Michelle runs workshops on financial wellbeing for organisations. But even if you just have any questions from today, then that link in the chat box is where you can go to book a time to chat before Christmas with Michelle. So it's just a short-term thing.
We can scan the QR code.
The QR code. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else have any last comments or questions before we wrap up today? Nothing coming up. Thanks everyone for joining us. It's really lovely to see you, and thanks for making time. I know it's a very busy time of year leading up until Christmas. We appreciate you coming today, and look forward to seeing you again in the future in our next webinar. Have a great Christmas. Bye for now.